Good morning, everyone. Abogada Kate, Lincoln-Goldfinch here from Lincoln-Goldfinch Law with El Show Sin Fronteras. We're always together on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays we are in English. What language am I speaking? And as per the usual, we will cover news of the week. I'll give you my interpretation, my explanation of the headlines that you're seeing. I'm also here to answer your questions live about immigration cases or updates. And then, as always, we'll end with an action tip of the week. There's a lot that we can be doing. I know that when we're watching all of these arrests and attacks on immigrant communities, and if you're not working in the space of immigration, it can be really hard to continue to think of ways that you can be helpful other than calling your legislators, which we want to continue doing. But I'll be sharing with you on a weekly basis action tips. So let's start with the news of the week. I'm going to start with a good news item. A federal court has blocked the cancellation of TPS for Nepal, Honduras, and Nicaragua. This will affect several 100,000, or maybe a little bit less than that, 60,000 or so for Nepal, and a few more tens of thousands for Honduras and Nicaragua. They were set to expire in August for Nepalese and in September for Hondurans. And there is a federal lawsuit pending that blocks the cancellation. I'll be honest, I didn't expect this. I thought that the federal court would allow this cancellation to go through. So, okay, let me just tell my system to stop pending this one tab. Maybe that'll help the stream go a little bit better. My computer was telling me it was using a juice on an article I had open. So anyway, this is great news for Hondurans and Nicaraguans and Nepalese in TPS status. Of course, as with all things federal litigation, we have this initial court order that will then go up to the appellate court, maybe even potentially to the Supreme Court. The good news is that the judge has blocked the cancellation of TPS for these three countries. And the next hearing on this case before this judge isn't until November 18th. So that buys a couple of months, 2 or 3 months extension, unless we see an appeal on that, which of course, if we do, I will notify you guys in the show and we'll do a post about it. That's number one. We'll start with the good news. Number two, Alligator Alcatraz, of course, is the notorious detention center that was recently opened in February in Florida, F words, that it has, is known for really awful conditions. It was built in the middle of a swamp. It has its own runway in order to just conduct deportations directly from the facility. Emotional abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, food abuse, all of these things have been reported coming out of Alligator Alcatraz. And in no surprise, some of the detainees are on a hunger strike. They are in their 10th day of hunger striking at Alligator Alcatraz. So we'll stay tuned on that. I don't think, anybody, it's no surprise to anyone that that's happening. And also you have to think about when somebody goes on a hunger strike, how bad things have to be in order for a group of detainees to go on a hunger strike. That really is a moment to start paying attention to what's happening when we see hunger strikes in detention centers. Third news of the week, with the infusion of funds from the budget bill that Congress passed supporting the Trump administration in its detention escalation, we are seeing a lot of hiring within the Department of Homeland Security, specifically ICE. They're looking for more agents to go and detain people. There have been some reports on the types of people, the psychological profiles of the type of person that is drawn to that work is concerning, right? Because the people right now who are going about their lives looking for a job and they think, oh, I want to go and do what I see those ICE agents doing, is pretty concerning, right? Because those are the people that are going to be hired to continue to do the work with the additional funding that Congress authorized. So we'll be keeping an eye on what's happening within ICE and the agents that they are hiring. Another good news item of the week is that we had a release, and this was a story that went semi-viral. It was reported by Univision. Lydia Terrazas is a great reporter who does some really good stories coming out of Univision. She really tells the stories and visits with the families. I encourage you guys to follow her on social media in Spanish. She broke this story of a U.S. Marine who went to a green card interview with his wife, who unknowingly had a deportation order from her childhood. She didn't even know that it was in her record. They had a brand new baby, a newborn at home when they went to this green card interview. And despite all of these factors, Marine Corps husband, newborn baby at home, she didn't know she had the removal order. They detained her. They detained her at the green card interview, and her husband, the Marine, was bringing the baby to the detention center to breastfeed on a daily basis. Well, a GOP senator got involved and advocated for her release, and she was finally released and has been reunited with her family. So that's another good news. Another good news item. Through the tour. I know I just glitched for you guys on social media. I'm just saying that we're in Minnesota. We're halfway through our tour with El Bus Sin Fronteras, which is our converted bus RV that we're taking, my family and I are taking around the country to provide information, resources, consultations to immigrant communities. One of the stops on our way was at the Mexican consulate in Denver, which of course is in Colorado. And this consulate oversees Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana, 3 states with very different policies about immigration. Colorado is very pro-immigrant from a statewide level. The legislature has passed laws prohibiting the police of Colorado from cooperating with immigration enforcement. They provide driver's licenses to undocumented people. Well, there was an instance where a police officer cooperated with ICE. They pulled someone over and then called ICE, and they are actually being disciplined by the state of Colorado. These cops in Colorado are being disciplined. It's just so interesting to see the varying policies. Of course, I'm in Texas. I live in Texas, although physically in Minnesota right now. And it's the opposite, of course, in Texas. The legislature in Texas, it passed a law requiring sheriffs in the state of Texas and county law enforcement to cooperate with ICE. Like literally the exact opposite law was passed in the state of Texas. So something to think about for immigrants who are living in this country. What are the local and state policies where you live? What is your relationship like with police? What is it like with the sheriffs? What is it like with the state troopers? And not necessarily deciding that you need to move because of these things, but understanding we talk so much now about like the number one thing that immigrant communities need to have right now is education and information. Know your rights, know the situation, inform yourselves, like that, that is the drumbeat. This question of law enforcement is one of the biggest things that immigrants should be paying attention to right now. Is if I get pulled over by the Denver PD, the Austin Police Department, the Travis County Sheriff, the state trooper, what are they going to do? What have they been ordered to do in terms of immigration enforcement? And it's different. It's different in every city, every county, and every state, and it's rapidly changing. So that's why we're doing this show. That's why I'm here for you guys. My DMs are always open to you. I want to know what your questions are and what you're not finding online, because I will do the research and share it with you. That's why I'm here talking to you right now. That's why I exist in this profession. So bring me your questions on that kind of stuff. Okay, a few more news items, and then I see some of your comments coming in. Go ahead and populate your comments. I'll get to them, your comments and questions. And this is like, part of the thing that I want to do is interpret some of the headlines for you, because there's so many headlines that are going right now. And sometimes they are a lot splashier. Like, the media, the news, they're paid to grab your eyeballs, right? They are paid to do headlines that get your attention, and fear grabs attention. So you're going to see a lot of headlines that are very fear-based, and you may not take the time to read it, or even it could be bad, reporting that it doesn't give you the full picture. So that's another part of the reason that we're here, is to really help explain and discuss what we're seeing in the headlines. So for example, one of the things that you probably saw this week was that USCIS announced a new policy on vetting family-based immigration cases. And it made it sound like now it's going to be hard to get family-based immigration. Well, that's not the truth. They just clarified a few things about, like, when somebody files multiple cases for different family members, they're going to look into that. When cases can be sent to the consulate or not. Can the U.S. citizen petition for someone when they're living abroad? Nothing really changed. There were just clarifications. And now that U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, which is an agency that's part of the Department of Homeland Security, which of course is headed by Kristi Noem, USCIS has a new leader who is enforcement minded. So they're going to be blasting with news headlines to make it look like they are cracking down on enforcement. So anytime you see a headline that's like family-based immigration is going away, or U visas or VAWAs or anything about that kind of thing, just read the article, send it to me if you want. I'll do a little video on it. But don't just trust what you're seeing in the headlines, because I think a lot of it is sensationalized. Another example of this, did you see the article or the headlines in the last 48 hours about there's going to be a new immigration bond for visas? The headlines made it sound like everybody who's going to be applying for a visa from here on out has to pay $15,000. Did you guys get that? Did you get that from the headlines? That's not the case. What they're announcing is that from certain countries that have a lot of visa overstays, they will be piloting bonds to certain applicants. What that means is that countries like, I can't even think of a country, I don't know, Libya, Yemen, that they will, if somebody applies for a visa from that country, DOS, the Department of State, might say, okay, we're going to grant your tourist visa, but you need to pay a $5,000 bond in advance of your visit. And then they pay the bond, come and visit, depart, and then the money is returned. So it's a pilot program. It only applies to certain countries. It's not an across the board thing. I wouldn't be surprised if it got blocked in litigation, but it is not that now all of a sudden everybody who is coming in on a visa has to pay $15,000. It's not it. And also the people who already have visas should not be having to pay these bonds. We'll have to see like where they will be assessing them and applying them. But I don't think, for example, that someone who has a visa flies in and all of a sudden CBP is like, surprise, you must pay us $15,000 if you want to get off this airplane. It's not gonna apply like that. But I'll be keeping you guys posted on that. Okay, those are the headlines that I wanted to discuss. I see questions coming in from Sebastian. Good morning, Sebastian. Do we have any news on DACA applications in Florida? Nothing new on DACA. DACA is the same as it's been for weeks or months now, is that the Supreme Court and the Fifth Circuit have ruled that DACA is legal, it's constitutional. Unless the president decides to revoke VAWA, which I don't think he will, the DACA as a program is not going away. The difficulty right now in DACA is for the state of Texas, because the Attorney General of the state of Texas argued that the state of Texas on its own should not have to grant work authorization to Dreamers, because then the state would be harmed by also having to provide driver's licenses to those people. It's an absurd argument. I do think that we should be giving Ken Paxton our feedback about that. But what it means is that now Judge Hainan, who's the lower judge, is going to be interpreting the Fifth Circuit decision. And we might see a situation in which in the state of Texas only, Dreamers can have deferred action, protection against deportation, but not work permission. That's not final yet. We don't have a decision from Hainan. I would anticipate something changes between now and then. but keep you posted. DACA initials they're processing, or the receiving applications for DACA initials. DACA renewals are still being approved. Everybody in DACA, keep your status active. Don't let your DACA expire, because then you convert to a DACA initial after your status has expired for more than a year. If you have any questions about that, DM me. We can do a consultation. We're still doing free consultations virtually around the 50 United States. Immigration law is federal. We'd be happy to consult with you guys via Zoom about your questions at no charge. So just DM me if you need a consultation. Instagram, Silly Diva. I get it. How are the women doing in Alligator Alcatraz? Are there any reports of inappropriate abuse? I haven't seen any sexual abuse reports coming out of Alligator Alcatraz. I have, of course, seen reports like this over the years of guards abusing women or exchanging treatment or favors for acts. That kind of thing definitely has gone down. I would not be surprised in the least if it were happening at Alligator Alcatraz. But one of the things that has happened in the Trump administration is we don't have as much access as we did before to these detention centers, because number one, the nonprofits used to go into these detention centers on a regular basis with funding to provide LOPs, legal orientation programs. So I did these back when I was a nonprofit lawyer. We would go into the detention centers and meet regularly with all the detainees there. And so naturally you would get a sense of what was going on, what were the conditions, how people were being treated. Well, all of those LOP funds have been pulled. And so the nonprofit attorneys that used to have regular access to the detention centers have lost access, number one. Number two, the DHS has issued a memo instructing congressional representatives to provide 72 hours notice before they oversee or visit a facility. And so there are no surprise visits occurring right now at detention centers. So anytime a delegation is coming to inspect a facility, the people on site are going to have 3 days to prepare, transfer people out of the detention center, clean things up, change clothes, change the food situation, fix things that are broken, fix the toilets, the plumbing, all of the stuff that we hear about as condition problems can be fixed right before a delegation arrives within 72 hours. So that's my response to that. What are the current rules at the U.S.-Mexico border for asylum seekers? That is an ever-changing situation. The Trump administration issued a complete block cancellation on asylum processing. There was a federal court order this week canceling that policy, so requiring processing for some asylum seekers. I don't know if the Trump administration is even following that federal court order or not, but I think it's no surprise to anyone that it's very difficult, of course, at this time to access any asylum applications for someone along the southern border. You know how it used to be? It used to be that up until the first Trump administration, that asylum seekers could walk up to the bridge and they could say, I'm afraid of returning to my country, and they would be interviewed. They'd be detained temporarily, put through a credible fear interview. If they passed the interview, they would be released and, prepare for their final hearing. And it was a very orderly, functioning system under existing laws that we had had in place for 70 years. And it worked for decades. And Trump completely dismantled it during the first administration. And then Biden inherited a border that had been closed for 4 years. And so a lot of people were trying to apply, trying to figure out what was going on. But we had a system of orderly processing of asylum seekers 8 years ago or whatever. I remember it. Chispa de Bomba, hi, thanks for being here with me always. Have I heard of any cases of a single person getting a work permit approved for someone that was on humanitarian parole, applied for adjustment after the termination of the program? I can't think of any specific cases where we've gotten work permission, but I feel pretty certain that they exist. If you want, I know you've asked me questions about humanitarian parole cases in the past. If you want to DM me, I don't know whether, I can't tell from your screen name. I know you're with me on a lot of these lives. If you are a current client, DM me, and I want to make sure that we're answering your specific questions about your own case. If you're not a client, but you're thinking of becoming a client, let's have a more in-depth conversation, because I want to make sure I'm answering your specific questions about humanitarian parole. Adam Lopez, how long is the wait to get a criminal record in a firm? Is it normal to take? No, 3 to 6 months to get information back from a law firm. Okay, if you're asking how long it takes to get a criminal record, it could take 3 to 6 months, because it depends on the agency that hosts the records. It could be that it's at a county courthouse somewhere, and that it's some rural courthouse that doesn't do virtual. Like some courthouses, you can go online and order the records and put in a credit card, and then they email them to you. And that's obviously very fast. Some courthouses, you have to call and speak to the clerk and mail them a check, and then they mail you back the records, and obviously that takes a lot longer. An FBI background check should take a couple of weeks. So it really depends upon the agency. So getting criminal records from an agency should take a couple of months, maybe I would say max probably 6 months. That's the outer limit of what it should take. If you're talking about getting your records from a law firm, the max that should be a couple of weeks, because really it's ethically, it's an ethical requirement of lawyers that we get copies of client files to them. And now we're not required to keep files more than 5 years back, but a lot of us do. All my files are digital. So I have, my files going back further than that. And a lot of lawyers do. But ethically, your file is your property. It's not the property of your attorney. And so when this is one of the indications to me of a quality lawyer or law firm, is how quickly they respond to file requests and how responsibly they turn over client files. One of the indications that a law firm is not being ethical or doing a good job is that they take too long to turn over a client file, or they ignore file requests. That's one of the ways we know if our colleagues are behaving ethically or not. There's a little peek behind the curtain. Puerto Rican Mama, what are the countries for the $15,000 bond? Let me see if I can look this up real quick, guys. Let's see, visa bond. I'm going to look this up for you guys. Here's an article from the CNBC. Okay, so it starts August 20th and it ends August 5th of 2026. We're talking about the bonds for visas. The program applies to leisure and business travelers who need a B1 or B2 visa. So this is what I was talking about. It's not people who already have visas and are using the existing visa to come in for visits. It's people who are applying for visas at the consulates, and they're from countries that have high rates of visa stays, or where screening and vetting information is deemed insufficient. The U.S. Department of State initially stated it would announce the list of countries as early as today. After the notice was published in the Federal Register today, it stated they would be announced within 15 days. So we don't have the report, but they are looking at some of the overstay rates are Chad, Laos, Haiti, could also apply to Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, and the Dominican Republic. These are countries that already have high rates of visa overstays. But we don't know that they haven't published the list of countries yet. So remember, for the bonds, this is for people who are applying for the visa who haven't gotten it yet from countries that have high rates of overstays. We don't know what countries those will be yet, and it's a pilot program. From HB Artistry Studio, any advice for Texas SB 8 law going into effect in 2026? Let me look at that. Texas SB 8. Oh, the sheriff's. Okay, so the SB8, this is the law mandating that counties that have more than 1 million people, which is the vast majority of them, are mandating cooperation between the sheriffs and ICE. It's essentially like what they call a 287G agreement. So what that will look like is that sheriffs, people who are detained in county jails, ICE can access that information and place ICE holds on people. That already exists. The difference I think that we're going to start to see is like if the sheriffs are investigating a crime, pulling people over, they will start to call ICE or even make detentions. They'll start asking immigration questions and make arrests if people are out of status. The natural follow-up to that is that immigrant victims of crime are going to be concerned about cooperating or reporting crime to sheriffs. And that's a natural consequence of a law like this. As a lawyer, I would say victims of crime should be reporting crime. It's important for public safety, of course, that any victim of crime reports that crime. I cannot guarantee, though, that a victim of a crime who reports it to a sheriff after this law goes into effect will not be questioned about their immigration status. I can't confirm that. So I think we'll just need to continue talking about what to do in those situations when that occurs, when that law goes into effect. Paula, my boyfriend has DACA and works out of state. Would you advise no traveling? Normally, I would say DACA, valid work permit, no problem traveling. Of course, probably you guys saw that prominent dreamer activist Social Santiago was apprehended and detained at the border, at the airport in El Paso by CBP. She was traveling on a domestic flight from El Paso to another place within the country. She was put in secondary inspection. I saw that people are fundraising to get her released from detention, which obviously is an indication that she was arrested and that she remains detained. I don't know her. I don't know about her case. I don't know if she had a criminal record. I kind of doubt it, but I don't know. So I can't speak to the specifics of her case. That could be an issue, right, for her. That could be part of what's happening. Because technically, dreamers who have valid work permission should be able to travel interstate. There's a couple of indications that safety is going away. Number one, this arrest of Social Santiago. Number two, some press secretary person within U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service said in an interview last week that dreamers are not safe from detention. That doesn't mean that the policy has changed. There's no executive order. There's nothing official out. But the messaging that the agency is putting out is that dreamers are not safe from detention. That would indicate to me that we're starting to see change. And if I were a dreamer, I would be really cautious. So if your boyfriend is working out of state, does that mean he's driving out of state? Does that mean he's flying regularly? I mean, do you guys need to relocate? I don't know. These are impossible questions. Feel free to DM. We can have a consultation about it if you'd like. Sonia, can someone with a permanent bar get status if married to a U.S. citizen? No. No. So permanent bar is when someone has been in the country for longer than a year without has accrued unlawful presence, has left and attempted to reenter. So it's somebody who has time, a departure, a reentry, or a deportation and a reentry. It's essentially someone that has entries and exits. And the way that you would go through, a family-based green card case is you'd file for an I-130, then you get a waiver for unlawful presence, then you do the consular process if they entered without a visa. Well, this permanent bar says that you have to leave the country for 10 years and there's no waiver available. So the only way to get a green card if you have a permanent bar through marriage is to leave the country and wait for 10 years abroad. There are some exceptions to that. And the one that I'll highlight is VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, is a protection for victims of cruelty in marriage to a U.S. citizen. Could be emotional abuse, other types of abusive behavior that doesn't necessarily mean physical violence. VAWA does provide deferred action to people with a permanent bar, but it doesn't provide a green card. So you could get a work permit through VAWA, even if you have a permanent bar, but you cannot get a green card unless your departure and reentry was tied to the abuse. So all that's pretty technical answer. What I would say is someone who's married to a U.S. citizen who has a permanent bar should consult with an immigration lawyer for sure. And we can talk about your eligibility and what it would look like. Okay, let's see. Can farm workers or undocumented laborers be deported more easily now? Sort of. I mean, essentially, the difference is that we now have DHS applying expedited removal, which is a fast track deportation. And what they're saying is that anybody who was apprehended within 2 years of their entry, even if they were released and it was a long time ago, can now be subject to this fast track deportation or expedited removal. So they're being really aggressive with their interpretation and application of this law that allows them to deport someone without a hearing. So we are seeing a lot more expedited removals. There's, of course, a lot of question around the legality of that, but they get people disappeared and deported so quickly that oftentimes it's hard for an individual to fight it. So in order to prepare and protect against that, consult now with an immigration lawyer, find out what you're eligible for, do some safety planning, gather the important documents that you need, have them in a safe place, have someone identified to protect you, pick up the children, all of that stuff if you get detained. Like all of the things that we've been talking about, this is how you protect against a fast track deportation. Because what happens is somebody gets detained and we have to act really fast. Sometimes they're gone before you can do anything about it, which is a problem. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to give you guys one last call for questions. If there's any last minute questions, go ahead and post them, and then I'll give you your action tip of the week. Remember, we talk about what can we be doing. Don't stop the regular stuff. Contact your legislators, talk about stuff on social media, support your immigrant friends and family, find out if they need you to run errands for them, support immigrant-owned businesses, all the stuff that we've been talking about. The action tip of this week is related to the Texas House of Representatives. As you guys, I'm sure, have heard, there's a redistricting effort that is a theft of congressional seats. It's a push by the Trump administration to take 5 more congressional spots in the state of Texas. Greg Abbott is pushing the state legislature through a special session to do a mid-decade redistricting. The perspective of most of us is that this is a thievery, that this is illegal. The Texas House Democrats, about 85 of them, have left the state of Texas to break quorum within the legislature. That is really heating up because Greg Abbott and the Republicans in the Texas House are calling for the arrest, criminal detention and arrest, or civil, it could be. But anyway, arrest of the Texas Dems who have left the state. So it's really, really hot, and we need to be focusing on this. But what I want you guys to do is support your Texas Democrat House of Representatives who have left the state of Texas. Check out, if you live in Texas, check out what district you're in. If you're in the Democrats district and they've fled, give them some love on social media, find their accounts, put a comment thanking them for what they're doing. If you are in a Democrats district who has not left the state, call them and tell them you want them to break quorum and leave the state. And if you are in a Republican district, call them and tell them to cut this nonsense out. We want them to focus on helping the flood victims, not stealing congressional seats. All right, let's do our last tip or comment of the week, and then I'll see you guys on Thursday in Spanish from Liana Moreno. Can law enforcement ask one's immigration status on a traffic stop? Great question, Liana. Law enforcement can ask anything they want to anybody at any time. The question is whether you have to answer that question. And the answer to that is no, you do not. Constitutionally, you have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and not answer questions about your immigration status. The consequences of not answering that could be that you get detained. Not that that's legal, but that's what we're seeing. So, I'm not going to give you advice about whether or not you should. I think you need to consult with a lawyer about what your status is and where you live and how you should react in those situations. But what I will say is, yes, a law enforcement officer can ask. No, you do not need to answer. That we can say definitively. And on that note, reach out to your Texas Dems, give them some love, especially if they've left the state and they've broken quorum. Y nos vemos el jueves en español. Thanks for being with me. Bye, guys.